Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. I'm Brett, the producer, and if you have been listening for a while, you know that Karl often threatens Scott with readings of continental philosophy. Well, today Karl makes good on those threats in the form of Martin Heidegger. Make sure you check back next week for a longer part 2 of this conversation. Thank you for listening, and here we go.
I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Schut.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we are going to talk about one Martin Heidegger's lecture, but somebody cared enough to write it down. It's called What is Metaphysics? It's 10 pages and 1 sentence of very special stuff.
I'm certain it was he that wrote it down because all of his utterances are oracular. Yeah, I was looking at this. My very last note is, what will Scott make of it?
Well, I trust my friend Karl isn't crazy, and you recommended it, and you said you enjoyed it.
I did, even the second time.
But, you know, I enjoyed, like, John Wick movies and stuff, and they're impossible, too, you know? So, it's okay. So here's my deal. I'm reading Edward Fester's book, Scholastic Metaphysics, right now.
Okay.
It never has anything made so much sense. And everything just follows once on, you know, and builds on itself. And then Heidegger wants to talk about his experience of anxiety being a metaphysical proof for nothingness. It's just, I can't even,
it's
bro.
It's not a proof, it's a precondition.
It's not even a precondition.
Well, but you can't, okay, so this podcast is going to be
dumb.
A podcast about nothing.
Right, which I have a problem with already.
But I don't mean in the Seinfeld sense, where it was a show about nothing. And I hated that show. It's about nothing, because in order to talk about beings, you have to be able to talk about what aren't beings.
I don't know that I buy that.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of stuff in here that I don't know that I buy. But before we do that,
yes,
these people need to go to onlinegreatbooks.com. They need to get on our mailing list. Of course, if they're not going to do that, then they need to go buy something. They need to go buy the World History Timeline. Why don't you go buy that? Because it's amazing.
It is. I have one.
Nobody else has one. It's a work of great care and great detail by a friend of ours, Andreas Noediker. You need to go get it. It's a one-of-a-kind thing, and we're the only people that have them in the cosmos, unless you find one at a used bookstore. Go get one of those. We've also got some books that are overstocks or books that we no longer use in the program, like some Lobes. We have some Loeb Classical Library books in there that you can go buy. Go buy something. Go do something, for crying out loud.
I didn't know we had Lobes.
Yeah, I got a few in there.
Lobes are fun. Let me try to help sell them. If you have a little bit of classical languages or would like to, a Lobe is a good way to do it because it's got the English on one side and the Greek or the Latin on the other. The Greek ones are green, the Latin ones are red. And so you can sit there and, you know, work through Augustine or something. I don't know which ones we have.
Caesar and Gallic War, I think, maybe some others.
Oh, Gallic War would be a good one because the Latin in Caesar's Latin is marvelous. It's the anti-Heidegger. It's perfectly clear. It's beautiful Latin. It's the best Latin you'll ever find is Caesar.
I was working on Latin at one point, and I called a great friend of mine, Carrie McGovern, who's an old Jesuit-educated guy and likes to read his Latin. And he's from Louisiana. And he said, what you need's an interlinear, Jack. And I was talking to him on the phone about this, and So I went and I started looking for interlinear jacks. Like, I didn't know what that was. I was Jack. He blew my mind.
Yeah, interlinears are great. I've got an interlinear Bible over there. I'm pointing. This is good pod when I point. Mm-hmm. But it has the Greek, which is what the Bible's in, not Hebrew. and then it has English, a very literal English under each Greek word. So you can't really read it. It's not good English, but if you know a little bit of Greek, you can make your way through it and see what's going on in the Greek. It's a really good way. You take a book that you want to read. That's a big motive in learning a language, and you do it that way. There's a guy, Evan Milner. He did it on a podcast, the Latinum podcast. I highly recommend it. I think it's still around. I haven't gone on it in a while, where he would just read oodles of Latin to you. He took a George Adler, not Mortimer, George Adler Latin textbook and read the whole thing. It's like 600 hours. You get through it and you can speak Latin a little bit.
It's a bit much.
Well, I would do it when cleaning the house, or doing dishes or something, or driving.
What you need is an interlinear, Jack.
Yeah, and so he'll do interlinears too. So he'll do Xenophon, if you can get Xenophon interlinear. Xenophon's a great story. It's these Greeks that go up to fight with the Persians and then get surrounded and cut off and manage to make it home. So it's this thrilling adventure story. And you get an interlinear, and you work through it. You already want to read the thing. So that's the motive to learn the language. So I'm pleased we have Lobes. There's other things you could do, dear listener. Believe it or not, there is not a huge amount of money in the online great books field.
No.
And we would like to continue providing this to you. So, and ads don't work anymore.
No, they
so ads are broken, but you aren't. So if you happen to know anybody, maybe you of course you know people, but if you know any odd people that you think need to read this stuff and are capable of doing it, send them our way. It would be very helpful.
Yeah, we're good at helping people, but they first must knock, and then it will be opened unto them. We will help them out. So my good friend, what are we going to read next? I sent you a Lysander Spooner tract. Did you have a look at that?
I have not yet. I've been digging into, so we have a few things in the hopper. So you suggested that. That's fine with me. We have Shelby Foote coming up, which is a big deal. I'm really enjoying that. I'm 150 pages into it.
You're ahead.
Into the first volume of 3.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to do the first volume, which is 850 pages.
Yeah. Gosh, what a writer, huh?
Oh yeah, I put like stars next to things that I want to read aloud, and they're just all over.
Yeah, what a writer.
Written in 1958. It's one of the definitive, I guess it's the definitive narrative of the Civil War. If you saw the documentary that Ken Burns did, he was the star of that.
Yeah.
He's the reason to watch that.
There's no Civil War documentary by Ken Burns, I think, without him. It seems to me, having watched that show a couple times and having read Foote, that Burns must have read Foote and said, oh gosh, why isn't this in film? Because it's just that good.
He also happens to have been the very great friend of Walker Percy. So I'm enjoying that a lot, but we can't do that in 2 weeks.
No.
So the Lysander Spooner would be fine.
Yeah, we're going to read, if you like that one, and then we'll read No Treason, Part 6. Yeah. The Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner, Lysander, 1870. Man, I tell you, I found out about Spooner in a zine.
I know nothing about him.
The anarcho-capitalist sort of folk, the heavy-duty libertarian folk, love him a lot. It'll be great fun to read that one. Yeah, look forward to the Shelby Foote thing. That'll give you, listener, 4 weeks to read that, I believe, before we actually release that show. Our little palate cleanser between Heidegger and Foote will be that Lysander Spooner, The Constitution of No Authority.
I think if you don't know anything about the Civil War, you don't know anything about the United States. For good or for ill. You know nothing about the nation in which you live if you don't know anything about the Civil War.
Old Foote says, before the Civil War, when people wrote of or spoke of this country, they would say the United States are blah, 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 blah. And then after the Civil War, it became the United States is.
Yes.
And he tells
for good or for ill.
For good or for ill.
Yeah.
And he tells the story of how that change happened. That's going to be that's going to be a hard show to do. Harder than this one about Heidegger. All right, you lead me. Go, slick.
Okay, so who was this guy? Martin Heidegger, 1889 and 1976. He's German, as you could tell by the name. He's hugely influential in the 20th century. That's what everybody always says. I'm not so sure. Whenever I read him, and I've read a fair bit, I come away with the impression that he's really smart, that I have gotten smarter too by reading it, but that if you ask me, what difference does it make? I don't know that I can give you an answer.
I texted Karl, listener, I'm just talking to the listener right now. I texted Karl and I said, this guy is the Elon Musk of philosophy. And Karl texted me back and said, no, this guy's smart, which I liked. He's either, what did I say, a liar or crazy. Is that what I said?
I think so.
Yeah.
The interesting comment you thought, is this some esoteric bullshit?
Yeah, some Straussian, esoteric stuff.
And I think there's a sense in which that's true. There was a quote I posted on your, gosh, I can't remember it. I posted it on your Telegram channel. Heidegger says something about when philosophy becomes comprehensible, it's lost. I thought about that because it is kind of incomprehensible. We're going to get into it, dear listener. I think it does make some sense. It makes a kind of sense. It sounds like it makes sense. Socrates talks about the cave in the Republic. It's this fable. We're all stuck in a cave looking at a wall, looking at flickering images on the wall. If you got out, somebody gets out and manages to make it to the surface and to see the sun and the trees and the water and everything that's actually real, and then goes back down to try to talk to the people who are still in chains, they can't understand what he's talking about. It's incomprehensible. They end up killing him. It's a Socrates talk, prefiguring his own end. This metaphysics stuff, if you think you've got it, and you think you have it in a PowerPoint, you don't have it. Yeah. And that's what I really like about this lecture.
The quote that you posted is, making itself intelligible is suicide for philosophy. And I bristled at that at first, and I've thought about it some more. I have a friend that was in my home book group for a time, and we got to, maybe it was Parmenides, or maybe it was Timaeus. I can't remember. One of the heavier lifts in Plato, And he says, why didn't he write this so this could be understood? And then we had this whole conversation about how in your freshman comp class, they tell you when you're writing for the public or doing technical writing, you should write at an 8th grade level or whatever. I've heard people now that say that most technical writing is at a 5th grade level.
IKEA instructions are just rebuses.
Yeah, they're just pictures, pictograms. And I said, there are certain concepts that are inaccessible to the 8th grader's mind. There are certain concepts that cannot be written in such a way that a normal 8th grader can understand them because they're not capable of it. If Heidegger is saying, if we write this out so that it could be understood cleanly, easily by the man in the street, then it wouldn't be the truth. Because the truth is too difficult. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah. I think so. Let me reframe it a little bit. You said that there are concepts that cannot be expressed to an 8th grader adequately.
Yeah, the average 8th grader.
I think there are some things that can't be expressed in concepts.
Okay. I'll allow it.
At least I take that you'll allow it. I think that's what... I was poking around the Twitter today, and I'm sorry, I confess that I do that under an assumed name. You'll never find me. They were talking about the subjectivity of beauty. Some blue checks were talking about thinking that beauty was subjective. No, absolutely not. It's not subjective. On the other hand, it's not conceptual. We did that Schopenhauer thing. You know, I can say, you can point to beauty. I'm thinking to myself, don't mention Grace Kelly.
Patty Page.
Patty Page, the lovely Patty Page. She has a street named after her in Claremore, right?
She's from Claremore. Did you watch that video that Trent sent?
Of Patty Page?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't. I'll go back and do that.
You know, she's wearing this gown, and it's 1955 or whatever. She's pushing Grace Kelly. It's lovely.
Well, I'll definitely look then.
Yeah.
But to put that in conceptual terms, what is it about her? Well, it's the ratio of the distance between her eyes compared to it's the grand Fibonacci ratio or something. I don't know. No, you've missed it. Just look at her.
Right.
To make things purely conceptual, there's a danger. You end up with PowerPoint. You end up with people thinking they've got it when they don't got it.
I don't know anything about what sort of spiritual system Heidegger adhered to, or your blue check marks there. But if they don't hold a concept of the transcendentals, then they end up applying materialistic measures to all things. So they're looking at these ratios, the length of her nose, this gap between her eyes, or whatever, just trying to, they try to reduce everything to the quantitative, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
They're using their hammer and they're nailing, and they're beating everything with their hammer, and it's not what it calls for.
Well, let me say a little bit more about Heidegger. Lived through the 20th century, was briefly a member of the National Socialists, got in trouble for that, wrote a whole lot of obscure things that everybody pretends they've read. Is supposed to be very influential. Again, I don't know. I don't know how influential he really is. I just know I feel smarter after having read him. And so let's read some and see if I'm crazy. That could be the subtitle of this one.
Right.
I was thinking, I wanted to do some Heidegger because he is allegedly so important. And I thought about doing his writing on some of his writing on technology, but it wasn't as easy as this.
Right.
He's not a fan of it and has interesting things to say about technology. But I think this was an easier way to go, an easier introduction into this person. So it's a lecture, What is Metaphysics?, delivered at University of Freiburg. I visited Freiburg in 1929. What is metaphysics? The question awakens expectations of a discussion about metaphysics. This we will forego. Instead, we will take up a particular metaphysical question. In this way, it seems, we will let ourselves be transposed directly into metaphysics. Only in this way will we provide metaphysics the proper occasion to introduce itself. It's not, I'm going to tell you what metaphysics is. It's, let's do some and let it present itself and see what sort of a thing it is. This is a typical continental approach. Just letting it, say what it is. What sort of a thing are you doing when we do metaphysics? It's not the same as physics.
No.
You're going to say something?
What is metaphysics? Aristotle says it's the study of being qua being, the state of being such as it is.
And I suppose you would take that because that's where we get the word from. Okay, it's from a book that Aristotle wrote that is called The Metaphysics, which is about beings as beings. But how do you do that? I mean, that's different than physics, which is also the study of beings, is it not? It's the study of beings as movable.
Yeah, I think so. It's the study of physical property, maybe. But, metaphysics doesn't have anything to do with physics, really. It's just the book that was published before physics.
It's meta's like after physics or beyond the physics.
Beyond.
It's the next book. But it's also a precondition. Can you really do physics if you don't understand what beings are?
You can't do anything. Metaphysics is prior to everything.
Right.
I think that's one of my main problems here with Heidegger here is that this show is going to be a boner killer for the whole audience.
No. Have faith.
I think he has his epistemology first. Instead of starting with metaphysics, he's going to look at the contents of his mind, and then hopefully that tells him something about metaphysics. He's got his cart before his horse, I think, here.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Let's see why he does that. All right,
First,
I would go to the third paragraph.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I was too. First, every metaphysical question always encompasses the whole range of metaphysical problems. I'll buy that. I'll allow it.
We find that in seminars all the time. Somebody starts talking about whether Agamemnon's decision was good or not. Well, you can go down the rabbit hole and say, what do you mean by good? And before you know it, you're talking about being in nothingness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this is the case, Karl, I'll read it again, that every metaphysical question always encompasses the whole range of metaphysical problems, is the corollary to that all metaphysical questions are the same?
I don't know. I would say they all, I'm going to be Heideggerian here, they all occur in the same place.
You see?
In other words, they're questions that humans ask.
Right, you're epistemic already. If there's a metaphysics in a tree in the forest and no one's there to think it, does it still happen? Of course.
Yeah, so this is the famous phenomenology, okay? So we want to start with things. Very good. I would like to start with things too, and then talk about other stuff afterwards. But to talk about things in themselves, nobody does that. It's always a human talking about it. Okay, so as he says later, second, every metaphysical question can be asked only in such a way that the questioner as such is present together with the question, that is, placed in question. All right, so what is being? You could also say, who's asking? All right, dogs do not do metaphysics, as far as we know. Cats might.
If they did, how would that change the answer to the question?
How do you have access to beings on their own, except as a human being thinking about it? This is not subjectivism. This is subject-objectivism.
Right.
You have the thing you're thinking about and the thinker that's thinking about it. This is the frustrating thing, but I think it's pretty, for me, I think it's insightful. Augustine talks about this in Confessions, which I have over there because I was doing that one too. When the kid asks the question, what was God doing before the creation of the world? The annoyed priest said back to him, making hell for people like you that ask questions. A good answer might be, and the one Augustine eventually does, and I think Heidegger is a little bit Augustinian, says, well, who's the person asking the question? What is this experience of time? You're worried about time and what God would do before the calendar time or universe time. Well, you're the one that's asking the question. You're the one that has time as a thing of concern. So maybe we ought to dig in there and then figure out what's going on. And so Augustine does his famous analysis of time and comparing it to what he thinks an eternal God would be, and they're different things. But the way he attacks it, well, let me see, what's my experience of time? Rather than assuming that time is an objective thing, it's just a thing out there, that I can't fit another conception of the divine in with the conception of time. Forgetting that time is a thing that happens to conscious beings, if it's anything. Does this make any sense at all?
No, it does. It does. And you're being mighty generous because just a little farther down here, he says, we are questioning here and now for ourselves. Our existence in the community of researchers, teachers, and students is determined by science. What happens to us, essentially, in the grounds of our existence when science becomes our passion?
Yeah, good question.
Well, yeah, but are there two kinds of questioners that get two different kinds of metaphysics? The man in the street and then the scientist?
I don't think so.
Then why did he say that?
Well, there's a particular way that science thinks of things as instrumental.
Sure. So do they get a different... So is he saying they get a different metaphysics? Because he could have said, what happens to us essentially in the grounds of our existence with opposable thumbs. That's not what he did.
So your worry is that this is relativist. Is that it?
No, I don't think it's relativist. I just think it's shaky. It's shoddy.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's relativist. I wouldn't make that accusation, but I wrote here in the margin right next to this that I do not agree that that proper philosophy will fit reality. Period. Now, nowhere in here does he say, well, the questioner, because of his outlook or his limitations or problems with sense data and integration of that into thought and so on, can lead to faulty philosophy. He doesn't say that.
Yeah, this is the frustrating bit about all of this continental philosophy. What continental means from the continent being Europe, which isn't really a continent. Their insistence that objectivity is a little bit of a deception.
Sure.
And the reaction that people will have, that I had reading this stuff, was, umbrage. What do you mean? What do you mean objectivity's not quite right? But then you think about it, we did this way back with Gabriel Marcel, a long time ago. Beings only appear to that being that can perceive them. It doesn't mean that the being that perceives them makes them be there. If I've got an old knife here, my presence here doesn't make this knife exist. But when I look at it and I think about it and feel its properties and everything, I'm feeling it in particular ways that a human explores things. And so the fact that I look at it as a tool, is it objectively a tool?
No.
But it's a tool. It's not very sharp. I use it for my fingernails and for opening letters. I can rub right on it. It's not very sharp. It's just I got it at Tennessee at a blacksmith shop. The guy had been on Forged in Fire, and they would sell these little things, and it's just a nail that they twisted and then hammered out to make a little knife. And it came with a little leather pouch. It's kind of cool. But to perceive it as a tool, as a thing of use, is that its essence? Or is its essence, it's probably steel, probably low-grade steel. Is it essence a chunk of low-grade steel? There's a number of ways that I could characterize this. What's the more essential? And when I'm thinking about it as a tool, that reveals something about me.
Sure, but Aristotle would tell you, yeah, you're way too far down the road, man. Like mild steel is its material cause. The guy that was on that show was the efficient cause. You're way too far. We're saying things about it that aren't proper to say. So if Heidegger says, okay, you as the tool-making animal sees it as a tool, and that drives the problems of metaphysics, Scott and Aquinas and Aristotle would say, you're not doing metaphysics.
Well, he might respond. He might respond and say, even to think of it in terms of causes, this is not to say that they're wrong, but, the most important cause is the final cause.
Right.
So there's 4 causes, dear listener, you should know, but it's 4 ways of understanding why things exist according to Aristotle, and it's very good. It's a wonderful way to think. Material is what it's made of. Efficient is who made it. What event made it happen. Formal is the structure of it or the plan of it if it's an artifact. And then the final is why it exists. For what purpose?
Yeah, it's so good. The material cause, wood and bricks. The formal cause, the blueprints.
Mm-hmm.
The efficient cause, the carpenter. The final cause, to sell mortgage products. Well, I say that, because there's a joke there, but also when you start thinking about it in terms of this, you start realizing that maybe some of these things we have don't actually serve the purpose that we at first thought they did. The causes thing, a much clearer understanding of what's in front of us. Anyway, there's a show there. But
my Aristotle teacher asked us, what's the final cause of an acorn? And we all said, oak tree. She said, no, it's squirrel.
Squirrel food. Yeah.
Yeah, most of them don't become oak trees. So to say that an acorn is essentially an oak tree, maybe. But what this does, it points back to who's asking the question. If I'm thinking in terms of final causes, it's because I want to introduce a word. It's a frustrating word. Heidegger doesn't talk about humans. He talks about Dasein, because once you say human, you're already in the realm of critters and stuff. So Dasein is just German for being there. Okay? So trying to abstract a little bit more.
Yeah, it's all one word. It's not das ein. It's not like the one. It's a being.
Yeah. Well, da means there and sein means being. So it's kind of being there. And so Dasein, which kind of means human, but not really, thinks of things in terms of care, thinks of things as projects. This is in other words, what you can get from this, which is elucidating, is you can get something about how we live in the world. That I mean, everything in this room, I think of them functionally. Whenever I'm asking what is it, I'm actually asking what's it for. So that final cause that Aristotle talks about, it might actually not be primary. And in fact, you can go wrong. I can't remember which essay Heidegger talks about it, but if you are thinking of things simply as, or primarily as, tools. This is in his writings on technology. You look at the natural world as a tool rather than letting it reveal itself, which is the way he'll speak, which seems kind of magical talk, but still, there you are out in you're out in the field and you're looking at this tree. And do you let the tree reveal itself? Or do you think, that's good lumber? Or that's vermin? That is a pernicious tree. You might miss the point of what it is by thinking, what's it for?
Is this his idea of eruption?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he uses this word IRRUPTION. Of course, this is in translation. He's speaking in German. I'm reading a translation of this.
It's worse in German.
I'm sure it is. It's never better in German. And so he uses this word eruption, eruption, whatever. That through this eruption, beings break open and show what they are and how they are. The eruption that breaks open in its ways helps beings above all to themselves. Ugh.
Yeah, I know, but it's so good.
So in this, we're almost off the first page here. He talks about these scientists and these investigators looking at these problems of metaphysics, and he says man's pre-scientific and extra-scientific activities are also related to beings, but science is exceptional in that, in a way peculiar to it, it gives the matter itself explicitly and solely the first and last word, blah, 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 blah. And when I read that, I thought, this is one of the problems that has arisen as a result of us abandoning the term natural philosophy for investigative sciences.
Mm-hmm.
When we quit saying that, people quit seeing investigative sciences as having a philosophical underpinning and as having philosophical consequences. I think the language changes the way that we hold the concepts in our minds, and the language that we use for these concepts steers us. Maybe I agree with Heidegger this way, right? That the language that we would use to hold the concept in our own mind, if we're word thinkers, and all of us good people are, forms the kinds of investigations we can do and the kinds of answers we can come up with. And me being a 14th century person, I guess, I'm like, well, no, it's natural philosophy. It's natural philosophy. That fixes all of this. Or it makes it easier?
It might. He has a quote somewhere. I know that's going to make smoke come out of your ears. Language is the house of being. That's a Heidegger quote. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Edith Stein complains about him. Edith Stein knew him in Freiburg. She went there to study under Edmund Husserl. She says, whenever Heidegger comes up to the infinite, he backs away. He doesn't want to go there, which I think is a fair criticism. I think if you are a 13th century, if you're Thomas Aquinas, I don't think these concerns are as big for you. I think the world is charged with wonder for you if you're Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
And you're not stuck in everydayness. And you don't have perhaps the problems that they had in 20th century Germany, which we probably have in 21st century America as well,
which are caused
of the
by,
forgetting of being.
Yeah, which were caused by forgetting Thomas and some other things.
Yeah.
So
on the other hand, how do you recover Thomas? You know,
I don't know. Got to throw a bunch of people in the ocean, I guess.
I'm going to argue at the end of this that this could help you recover Thomas. So we're still on page 1.
Yeah.
It says in end of paragraph 4, the rootedness of the sciences in their essential ground has atrophied. You know, so there you are. You're treating the entities of physics as if they're entities, as if they're primordial, and you're forgetting that they're not.
Yeah, the natural philosophy thing.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that.
He has a way of writing. Well, I texted you. Is this some esoteric Straussian bullshit? And
yes.
You said perhaps, or something like, I don't remember what you said, something like that. Listen to this sentence. This Trinity, this is the second paragraph there on the second page, Karl. This Trinity, relation to the world, aptitude, and eruption, in its radical unity, brings a luminous simplicity and aptness of das Ein to scientific existence. That doesn't mean anything. Radical unity? It's either a unit or it isn't. This is just luminous simplicity and aptness.
Yeah, it's some poetic stuff there.
Well, what's attitude?
So attitude is going to be important. This was one of the things that frustrated you and frustrated me too. And yet I think the German is Stimmung. It's often translated as attunement. That there are revelatory moods. Mood is too mild. It's not a mood. It's not, I'm feeling crabby today. That's not revelatory. But, you know, you break through the trees and you discover the Grand Canyon laid out below you. You know, that might be a revelatory mood. That might reveal something of being to you. The eruption, I looked it up. Eruption is a sudden, violent, or forcible entry, a rushing or bursting in.
IRR. So eruption.
IRR.
The volcano throws its contents outward.
Yeah.
Eruption is a violent implosion almost. Not an implosion, it's a violent rushing in. It's the foreign.
An example quote, World War II begins not with Hitler's attack on Poland, but with the Japanese eruption into Outer Mongolia in July 1939. The scientist is the one doing the erupting. Well, there might be a problem with that. I don't know. You have Sigmund Freud explaining everything in the world in terms of sex, except his own overriding theories of everything in the world. You're forgetting that he's part of the thing that he's exploring. Treating the psyche as an object that can be tuned, you know? And there's a problem with the scientific attitude.
Yeah. So how does the scientist create knowledge or verify truth claims?
You limit things to a small enough set of features, and then you can verify truth claims.
Yeah. Can we say scientific method?
Yeah.
Well, how do they verify the scientific method works? Because you can't do it because you can't use the scientific method to do it.
Right.
They're all honked up. So he's going to go on to write 8 more pages about this. And again, he's just taking the epistemology for granted. Like, oh, this is how people think. This is where the knowledge comes from. Blah blah blah. And it's just he's way too far down the road. I mean, this is what you would do if you weren't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I had a group of guys I went to junior high with that would sit in the library at lunchtime and repel girls and talk about shit like this.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
And this is what it sounds like.
Well, let me go a little further, because I think there's stuff of value here. I think there's stuff of
it's not total hockey tickets, but there's stuff of value.
What are hockey tickets?
Toilet paper. Have you not heard that?
Oh. Do you even have hockey down there?
No. Horse hockey. You know.
Oh, okay.
Bull hockey.
All right. So science deals with beings and nothing beside. And so you can do a little word play here. If science is right, then only one thing is sure. Science wishes to know nothing of the nothing. Okay, so we're going to only talk, physics is only going to talk about beings. It's not going to talk about nothing.
Yeah, because you can't know anything about nothing because there's nothing to know.
Right, but it doesn't mean that nothing's a nothing.
Yeah, it means it's that which has no existence.
Sort of.
I mean, if he wants to change the definition of the word.
Well, no, you should look at the word. The word is no thing.
Right.
Okay? Thing, this is also pointed out to me by Heidegger. He did make me smarter. Thing is a German word.
Ding.
It means a matter of concern. Okay, which is why the Icelandic parliament is the thing. The all thing. Okay? It is something of concern. So the nothing is not quite nothing. Because you can talk about it. It's not a zero. Well, you can even talk about a zero. The pothole is a nothing. Okay? The pothole is a place where there is no pavement. It's not really a thing, but it's certainly a thing, isn't it? Because you don't want to drive into it?
Well, we're not talking about a metaphysical pothole, I don't think.
No, I'm just trying to defend Martin here.
Well, I know, but in my home book group last week, we read, what did we read? Oh, Boethius's Consolational Philosophy. And my gosh, that's good. 35, 40 pages of him just belly aching about the kangaroo court trial that put him in prison, which was terrible, but I don't really want to read about that. You know, strikes a little close to home. But then after that, he gets into these metaphysical problems, and he gets in the problem of evil and the problem of free will, and I think it's all lovely. But he says that evil is the absence of the good, right? And there are a couple guys in my book group that just couldn't do it. You know, they couldn't. So if evil,
that's
is the
a really good example.
If evil is the privation of the good, what in fact is it? Well, it's a lot like your pothole. It's where pavement isn't, or it's like a concavity. What's a concavity? Well, you know, what's a vacuum? Well, there's no such thing as a vacuum. I mean, they're just models for thinking about when there is no thing. And we had a couple guys that just, I mean, frankly, Clay, you ruined the whole fucking meeting because they couldn't do it, you know? So OED says nothing, not any material or immaterial thing, not.
Now look up thing.
But, no. I know what you're doing here, but OED said material or immaterial.
So I want to go on that evil example because I think that's pretty good. I have trouble with evil as privation too.
Sure.
I take Thomas's word for it. It makes sense to me. Evil is a lack of something that ought to be there, a lack of some quality or feature that should be there. I get it. However, that privation sure seems malicious.
Well,
It seems to be more than just privation, which is why people have a hard time with it.
Yeah, what you're smelling there is free will in the absence of the good.
Fine.
Yeah.
What you're smelling is the nothing creeping around the will. Let me be Heideggerian.
Okay, but there's still nothing metaphysical to say about it, except that it isn't, but that it isn't positive. It isn't not positive in a judgment.
Well, there might be something to say about it because you say, this is the puzzle that Socrates had. I think this is a really fruitful line of conversation. Socrates, many times it seems like he just can't grok why anybody would ever do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you knew the good, why don't you choose the good? And the reason why you don't choose the good is for somehow your will goes beyond the good. It goes around the good. It goes outside the good. There's something other. You are capable of acting out of spite.
Yeah, but Boethius didn't address spite, which is the interesting test case for this, right?
Yeah.
But he says people are misinformed as to what the good is, or they have an improper calculus. Your example of the cigarette, people don't smoke cigarettes because they want cancer. They like the collegiality during the smoke break. They like the nicotine, whatever. So their calculus is honked up.
That's all understandable. But then I fling that cigarette out of my car.
Right. Oh, well, I think he would say that that's also a bad calculus. It was the risk of fire danger or the evil of littering was lesser than, what you would see as your effort to prevent those things. Wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it for you to. Now, the spite, push, it's even hard to come up with examples of pure spite. If I can't have you, no one will. The guy breaks up with the girl and she kills him or something like that, maybe.
I thought a lot of our very fine Outlaw Country Music and Ideas podcast. You were making the case that a lot of these people just aren't going to do what you want them to do just because you want them to do it, even if it would have been good for them.
Yeah. I'm still not sure that that's spite. I think that the feeling that they get or the sense of agency they have from doing the thing that they shouldn't have done is a high value for them. It's an expression of self or liberty or freedom or whatever.
Yeah. So being able to choose, let me just go with me on this. Mm-hmm. Being able to choose not the good is the good they're seeking.
Yeah.
Well, let me transfer, since we like transcendentals here. The good is equal to the being, is equal to beauty. So these are scholastic categories. If something's good, it also is. Okay? So let me change. They are able to choose the not good. They are able to choose the not being. And nothing pokes its head in. There's a way you could phrase that is they're choosing the nothing over the thing.
Maybe so. But that's not their experience. I think their experience is, this is my good, which is rubbish. I don't like that.
Yeah.
They're not choosing the vacuum.
Let's go on a little bit. Where it gets really fun. So in the second part, we are on page 2 now, dear listener, on the internet copy that I found.
I want you to know that I wrote absolute bullshit 3 times in the first 2 pages.
So the last paragraph of section 1, science wants to know nothing of the nothing. Let me just read that whole paragraph. We'll see.
Yeah, do so.
We'll see. But even so, it is certain that when science tries to express its proper essence, it calls upon the nothing for help. It has recourse to what it rejects. What incongruous state of affairs reveals itself here? With this reflection on our contemporary existence as one determined by science, we find ourselves enmeshed in a controversy. In the course of this controversy, a question is already evolved. It only requires explicit formulation. How is it with the nothing? All right. So if science is only going to deal with the beings that are part of its particular science, that means it's not going to deal with the not things. Well, you kind of need to know what a not thing is. You have to be able to look beyond the things you're looking at to even know that they're the things. Let me give you another example. If I take you and blindfold you and take you up, right up to something, and take the blindfold away, and you look at it and it's so close, all you can see is grayness. Well, what is it?
Yeah, it's a battleship or whatever, and you can't tell.
You don't know. We got to back you up until you can see around it. Okay? Until it appears in the nothingness. And then you can see that it's an elephant.
Is this a critique of science?
I think so.
Why doesn't he critique it then?
Well, he
He could do a better job.
Let's go to the end. Go to page 10.
Oh, thank God.
We're going to go back to the middle.
Oh, no.
So on page 10, in the third paragraph, only because the nothing is manifest can science make beings themselves objects of investigation. All right, so unless you can see around the elephant, you can't investigate the elephant. Only if science exists on the basis of metaphysics can it advance further in its essential task, which is not to amass and classify bits of knowledge, but to disclose in ever-renewed fashion the entire region of truth in nature and history. Okay, so science is not just a classification. It's supposed to reveal to disclose, another word for reveal, the entire region of truth in nature and history. Let's go further, because I have a star next to this paragraph. Only because the nothing is manifest in the ground of Dasein, I know that's some Heidegger crap right there, can the total strangeness of beings overwhelm us. Only when the strangeness of beings oppresses us does it arouse and evoke wonder. Only on the ground of wonder, the revelation of the nothing, does the why loom before us. I suppose I can pause right there. That's the direction I think this lecture is going, where I found it very valuable.
So should he have titled this, "Why we should return to natural philosophy"?
Perhaps, or he might have titled it "Wondering About Wonder."
So you know that I have this chemistry minor and a microbiology background, you know.
Yes.
And there was a time when I thought, well, I would like to be a doctor. That's before I figured out that being a doctor is horrific. And a lot of the kids I went to school with were botany, zoology type folk. And I didn't pick those two things because they're basically Trivial Pursuit and leaf collecting. It's just endless classification, endless collecting, endless bird watching. And, you know, somebody out there that has one of these degrees is saying, no, that's not true. Well, your binoculars might be a microscope, but they don't know anything about why. Nothing about why. They barely know how. Barely know how. Barely know how. And I even as like a 19-year-old, when I was wading off into this, I knew that zoology, botany, and some of those biological sciences, well, actually all of them knew nothing of whys and nothing of hows, almost nothing of how. I pacified myself by going into microbiology, because in microbiology, physics and chemistry and living things collide in a much more interesting, pointed way than they do when you're looking at a gazelle or something. And then, of course, you know, the whys, the modern physicist, chemist, whatever, has nothing of the why. You know,
nothing of the why. I would say they
the big why, right? The big W, why.
The why.
Why? I mean, they know, oh, well, everything's basically charges. Okay, fine. But why? You know, so I circled this one too. This is a big paragraph. that he could have opened and closed with. There's a big problem with science, and he's there in 1929. He's standing right on, right at the apex. Einstein's thrown out some stuff like 1914, I don't know. And, there's crazy stuff happening, and none of them, nobody knows why. The big W why. They're not answering any real questions. Einstein made it worse. Like, even if he's right, he's not. Even if he's right, he made it worse. He made human existence worse, less explicable, less wonderful.
Yeah. I want to go further than that. I would say not only don't they know the whys, I would say they probably don't even know the whats.
Yeah, they don't know the right questions to ask, you mean?
Yeah, or no, even, I would say not even letting the phenomena present itself. I recently had a discussion with an acquaintance. Good guy, smart, it was about some current events. You can probably figure out what it was. But he said at one point, as a scientist, because he works in the medical field, right? And, I was diplomatic and everything. But are you a scientist? Are you really a scientist? Let's name the scientist. Are you Isaac Newton? Okay? Are you being dumbstruck with the glory of the motion of the spheres and figuring out the pattern by which you can, and doing the math? Are you the one that did that? I don't think. No, you're probably not. Probably what you are is a person who reads scientific papers that, has a control group and a test group.
They're clerks, Karl. They're clerks. Yeah. The positivism has overrun science to the point they're just all clerks.
I was thinking also as you're speaking about, I would say Henry David Thoreau is a bit more of a scientist than most, because he went out there and what are the discoveries he made? I don't know, but he went and looked at things a lot.
Mendel.
Yeah.
Holy crap. The brilliance in that monk, counting wrinkly peas and smooth peas and then finding explanations that had predictive power is astounding. Did he follow the scientific method? When you're in 7th, 8th grade biology or whatever, I remember them having us count corn. It wasn't peas. We had like maize, got the purple corn and the yellow, and it's all on one ear of corn. And we used it to show the Mendelian genetic thing. Did he follow the scientific method? Now, we're taught that he did, but he didn't. He did not start with a theory or a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. He planted peas until peas told him, you need to look here. We're doing something.
Right.
There's a rationality in what we're doing. Look at us. And he looked until it emerged.
Yeah, Thomas Kuhn has a book, Structure of Scientific Revolutions, I think. And he argues that science does not work the way that you think it does.
It can't.
It's not a bunch of people collectively working in a community. It's the community gets to a point where it can't progress anymore because reality is poking at the community, and then you have a paradigm shift. And the guy who shifts the paradigm was not working in the community.
All true innovation has to come from a brilliant, cross-trained person. If you have a bunch of engineers working on an engineering problem, they can only iterate. That's all they can do. They can get the knife a little sharper, they can make it a little better, but they can't do something entirely different. You have to bring a machinist or somebody with, a metallurgist, or you got to get somebody from outside of that community that can see what has been done, bring something new to it, and make it happen. Because now it's all just clerking. N is 2,895 people, and you write a bunch of stuff down, you do spreadsheet magic, and maybe you draw a conclusion. It's all clerking.
Mm-hmm.
Faraday and Mendel and all these guys are, now it could be knowledge of how things work has advanced to the point that sort of brilliant man in the workshop kind of thing can't happen anymore. I don't know. But if it can't, if the advances in understanding and knowledge aren't accessible to that kind of person, I think we need to really look at, are they something that we need to do? Is it the same kind of knowledge then? And is it capital G good?
Yeah. I want to drag it back to Heidegger. So Heidegger's teacher, so Edmund Husserl is the big deal in phenomenology at least 100 and some years ago.
People just like saying Husserl.
Husserl. I got to see his grave, by the way.
Did you dance?
No, I didn't dance on Edmund Husserl's grave. Why would I even do that? Nobody hates Edmund Husserl.
That's a good joke, though. I had to go.
No. So I went to see it. It's at a convent somewhere outside Freiburg. Allegedly, perhaps he may have been a convert at the end of his life. Maybe. Edmund Husserl. So I had a nun. She spoke German and not much English, and I spoke English and not much German, and she was showing me around and took me out in the graveyard and showed me Edmund Husserl's grave. Only the gravestone wasn't there. It was off being cleaned or something. So I actually got to see not the gravestone. So I got to see the nothing.
No, you got to see the grave, but there was no stone. It's not nothing.
Right. So his big slogan was back to the things themselves, but he didn't mean things quite the same way I think you mean things. That it meant, let's not even talk about all this science stuff. That's all out there. Let's talk about how consciousness is appeared to. Which sounds like you're going backwards, but I think you're actually going forwards. Okay? So you mentioned Mendel letting the peas, I forget the word you used, appear to him. The peas revealed themselves to him.
Yeah, okay? Something rational about the behavior of peas occurred to him somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, so penis. He's working with peas. If you go in there with your preconceived, 17th century notion of peas and just make them fit into your conceptual framework, you're probably going to not figure out the genetics of peas. You have to let them appear to you outside of theory. Take the theory away. See how is it that I am being appeared to by reality? Theories come after that. We tend to get it backwards and think that theories come first. So the scientific method, for example, becomes the tool with which we look at the world, even though the scientists don't use it. The real scientists don't use it. The clerks use it to publish papers. But as good as that method is, that the method comes after, and apologize for using continental philosophy language here, after you've been appeared to by the world for a while. And you let being reveal itself to you. I know it sounds magical, but it'd be like those nerds that you talked about, repelling girls. Maybe they get a book on girls. What is it? The Men Going Their Own Way movement. Maybe they get one of those books.
Right.
And now they think they understand women. Now they've got it.
Well,
they've never been appeared to by a woman.
That's definitely the pickup crowd, for sure.
Yeah, they've never let a woman reveal herself to them. They have no idea. They've read about it. If they actually kissed a girl, or had one walk by and catch sight of her, and then your whole world changes, they would know that the book is BS.
But they're so busy studying penis, the state of being a pea, and genetics, classical genetics. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean at the end you don't come up with the same theory that the clerks have, the scientific clerks, but that you've recovered the basis of the whole science. You've let beings be in your presence.
if your approach to science and knowledge creation is that of the natural philosopher, you have an inkling of the importance of the things that you're learning and how they all fit together and what the whys are. If you are just being a Francis Bacon style, scientific positivist, letting the data speak, it's trivial pursuit and spreadsheet stuff. It's unintegrated knowledge.
Yeah.
And Hambrick thinks that wisdom is when the knowledge, the true knowledge, becomes integrated into a whole and tells you a third thing.
Yeah, let's look at that word. I'm gonna try to make connections here, and we've skipped the whole middle of this paper. So
thank God.
Yeah. When you go into natural philosophy, I want to poke at what that word means, and then try to connect it back here. The philosophy, the word means love of wisdom. It does not mean wisdom. It's a verb, or it's a noun for a verb. And so when you say go back to the approach of natural philosophy, I don't see that as being very different than what he's talking about here. When you realize just how strange beings are. I mean, the last sentence of the whole thing. Why are there beings at all and not rather nothing? This is a metaphysical attitude where you're just floored by the beingness of things. I know this is weird language, but I mean, those nerds, that there are girls at all, should be a source of wonder for them. They shouldn't be tools or, something that they hope to use. They should be things at which they're somewhat reverent. That's a terrible sentence. Things in the presence of which they're reverent. So recovering the strangeness is a good thing. Things are weird. All philosophy begins in wonder. That's what Aristotle says.
The natural philosopher, lover, to philosophize is to work at loving wisdom, right? The philosopher is he or she who loves wisdom. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. There's no wisdom in science. It's gone. There's no interest in it.
Well, as taught and practiced, there doesn't have to be.
No.
There usually isn't.
And it's not, no one asks for it. It's not part of the evaluation, whether, when somebody says, is he a good or a bad scientist? And as a result, it's pure greed and avarice. They just want more facts, more stuff, more data, more. And so it just cheapens everything. It cheapens every observation. It cheapens every discovery. It's gross.
I think that's correct. I was thinking of when you know that you're in the presence of an actual scientist, and it is not by any discoveries that have been made. It's by the joy when they tell you about the thing that they're into. They're just as amazed by it as they hope you will be.
Yeah.
Let me show you this. Let me show you what happens when we drop pure potassium into water. Stand back, though.
Yeah.
It's the little kid wanting to blow things up. Why? Why are you blowing things up? For a purpose? No, I'm blowing it up because I can blow it up. It's cool.